You are destined to fail as soon as you are trying to...
I don't know if writers are attracted to failure.
I think everybody has this idea of failure, but nobody knows what it is, right? I'm gonna fail and I'm gonna go down in flames, and you're not. The only failure in screenwriting is...
In this business, you can get rewarded for failing, and you can get passed over for succeeding.
That's what I see over and over again, that people do to fail.
Marcus, how many screenplays have you written?
Probably around 50.
50, okay.
Yeah.
How many scripts have you sold?
Oh God, 3.
3, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. What do you think it is about those 3 versus the other, whatever, 47?
Well, not. It's a very good question. What is it about those 3?
Out of all the spec scripts in Hollywood, the reason it's not made to fruition is just people writing the wrong thing. So there's so many. My view is this: it's like there's this stereotype in Hollywood that there's every other waiter you meet is like has a screenplay on the side. Every real estate agent's writing something on the side, and in truth, like that's reality. A lot of people come here with big Hollywood dreams and want to write that great screenplay, and people just kind of go, oh, well, you know, they're not talented, they're writing bad scripts. Certainly there's a lot of bad scripts, but at the same time, there's a lot of very talented people who just aren't writing the right things. So they're not writing the right things, they're not writing what Hollywood needs, and they're not presenting their work in the way that it needs to be presented to get doors to open. So if they just shift a few of those elements, if they write what Hollywood needs, which are goldmine genres, as we outline in the book, if they present their ideas in a way Hollywood needs to hear them, which is about pitching your story in a way that is, this is how my script helps your company, this is how my script answers that need in the Hollywood system, and then if you just kind of get yourself out there at the same time, like that's how you really do it. It's building, it's not selling a one-off script, it's building a career.
Genre is really the key to understanding screenwriting today. And it comes from what I call the first rule of Hollywood, which is that Hollywood doesn't buy and sell movie stars, directors, or writers. It buys and sells genres. Now, genres are story forms. And more importantly, they are the all-stars of the story world. They are story forms that have been told over decades, centuries, and in some cases, like with myth, thousands of years. So they've already been worked out, and they've been worked out very, very great detail, and they know exactly how their characters work, they know what their themes are, they know how the plot is going to work, and so on. So it's very, very tight. Now, in order to sell to a worldwide audience, you have to use these different genres because this is what the audience is really buying. When an audience goes to see one of the big summer blockbuster films, they may not know it in their head, oh, that's a myth-based film, or that's an action film, or a combination of the two, but they know what they like. And that's what's underneath each one of those stories. Avengers, Dark Knight, so on. These are all just basic story forms, basic genres with a unique skin placed on top. So it's very important, first of all, for the writer to understand what genres they are working in. It's also very important for them to understand how to combine their genres, because almost every film that gets made now is not a single genre. That was decades ago. Now, almost every film that gets made, not just in Hollywood, but in worldwide cinema, is a combination of 2, 3, and sometimes 4 genres. Now, a lot of writers know this. What they don't know, they usually don't know, is that combining genres is very difficult, because each genre has its own hero, its own opponent, its own desire line, theme, and so on. So when you start combining these, typically you end up with chaos. You end up with so many story elements that are unconnected that the script doesn't work. So it's very important to understand how to put these genres together. One final point about this. When a writer is developing a story idea, right at the beginning of the writing process, they come up against the biggest decision that they will have to make, which is, what genre is this story? The biggest reason that writers fail at the premise, and by the way, 99% of scripts fail at the premise line, right at the very first decision in the writing process. The biggest reason it fails is not that it wasn't a good idea, it's that they used the wrong genre to develop the idea.
The new writer often doesn't realize that the script doesn't work in the first place. Because there's so many different working parts. There could be a part that's not working. The main thing often with new writers is they either go to soulless commercial crap or way too personal that has no commercial aspects. And it's like finding that middle ground is often the tough thing to do. And that ends up being the thing that I think is the average writer probably has trouble finding that middle ground.
I think young writers, it's very compelling for them and seductive for them to go, what's on trend this week? Let me write that. But if they don't write something that is personally revealing, even if it's, a gothic mystery or sci-fi, whatever direction, if it doesn't reveal them and their voice, then it's just like 1,000 other scripts that are trying to catch the trend of the day. And they're fungible and bland, and I would just say to the writer, because I'm sure everybody, there's so many ambitious, the most ambitious people from every high school come here.
I always say the biggest thing to write right now is something that connects to your emotional truth. So if you are dying to write something that has no link to your emotional truth, then think of why you're passionate about the concept. And maybe move for, like I've helped writers think of personal stories that they didn't realize actually did connect to the concept. So I think it's really, I definitely think that there are writers who function better writing about things that are removed from them. Mm-hmm. But what you have to think about, like say when you take like Harry Potter, you ground it in thematic emotion, in the idea of, what does ground the concept. And those are themes of, childhood and coming into your own, and things that we all connect with on a massive level. Like when I covered the 4400, I remember thinking, okay, well, not many of us are going to relate with 4,400 who are abducted from Earth and then returned back to a life that moved on. But what we identify with is abandonment, redefining your life, the idea of failure to reconnect with a family that has moved on. There are all those things we connect with. So I think when you're writing stories that are outside your emotional truth, it's figuring out how to ground them so that even though the concept may be way outside anything the emotion and the themes are connected to you.
When we did I Would Die For You, people were, the town was hungry for like, what can I put Jennifer Love Hewitt in, and what can I put Ryan Phillippe in, and all of those people, they were hungry for that stuff. And I wrote something that fit that. And so it was like, yes, great. It was a fit, it made sense.
One of my script deals that happened because the temp receptionist for a production company I cold called. I pitched my script and he goes, well, that sounds like a lot of the posters around here, but I'm the temp receptionist, I can't do shit for you. And I said, can I send you my, when is your temp time up? And he goes, I'm here for another week and a half. And I said, can I send you the script? Can you read it? He goes, I can't do anything for you. I said, that's fine. Can I send you the script? And so I sent him the script, he read it and went, this is is a great script. And so he then pitched it to the head of development. And the head of development read the script, probably reluctantly, and said, this is a great script. So I sold that script to the company based on the temp receptionist. The temp receptionist became the full-time receptionist. And he got promoted. The head of development ended up eventually becoming the head of production. And all these things happened because this guy who had no chance to do anything for me read my script. But that's the way the business kind of works, is you get your script out there. So the difference between that unsold writer and that sold writer, or writer that's made money, is it's not as much access as it is the material. So that sold writer has often learned some lesson, whatever that lesson is, that the unsold writer hasn't. That isn't always true, because there's those unsold writers that are right there on the edge and it's just about to happen, and it will happen. But there are other writers that aren't there yet. So one of the things I always say is read your 5 favorite screenplays and read yours. If one of these is not like the other, you aren't ready yet. If you read your 5 favorite screenplays and then read yours and you go, my script is on the same level as these, then you're probably ready. But a lot of people think they're ready and they aren't.
I can go back to Sean Ryan again, the one who was so promising, and he got a job on a sitcom as soon as he came to LA, and then he didn't work for 6 years. And what he did is he wrote, and I think that he wrote about 14 spec scripts. And what happened is his scripts were all good, but nothing was getting him traction. And he asked his manager, he said to his manager, send me an example of a script that is getting somebody work. And his manager sent over the script that had the most buzz at the time, and Sean compared it page to page and said he'd have 3 things on a page that were really good. But this one, the one that got the buzz, every single beat was perfect. And when he realized that he had not been hitting the mark, he started to write and hit the mark. And in not too long of a time, he got hired on a show, and that show led to another show, and then he got, he developed The Shield. So you just have to keep working.
So by the time I graduated from college, I was torn about whether to go pursue writing or pursue production. And frankly, I wasn't good enough to be a professional writer at that time. So it was the better path for me to pursue production and practice writing, write spec scripts, and get better at them. My school for that was they showed reruns of the Mary Tyler Moore Show and the Bob Newhart Show, where he was the psychologist, in the afternoon. So when I was unemployed, I had freelance employment as a commercial production assistant at that time. When I was unemployed, I'd watch the shows in the afternoon, and I'd try to scrape up scripts from somewhere to read them. It's much easier now to to at least get the resources to learn your craft. They didn't even have VHS tape machines at that time when I was starting out, so all you could do was watch TV to study something. Now, go watch 50 episodes of something on DVD or stream it or whatever, and the scripts are available on the internet.
It's amazing how people will sign up for something that they're ill-equipped to do, for several different senses, right? So the first sense of being the wrong writer for the project is just that this project is too technical for your skill level. So this happens a lot with people's passions projects, where they have this dream movie that they've wanted to write since they were 7, but then they start to learn screenwriting and they start on that movie. And no, that should be like your 5th movie, or maybe your 3rd movie, but certainly not your first one. And so there's just this, the first level is just, you're not good enough yet to take on a project of that scope. Maybe it's too many characters, it's too complex in its story, the structure is just going to require more from you than you're able to give. So, and then the second, another part of that is sometimes it's going to require a lot of research from you that you're just not able to commit to, especially if you're learning your craft. People tend to be focused on learning the craft and not have time, to go off to the Yukon to research, how Eskimos, make whale meat or something. Like that kind of weird complexity that in a story in terms of research is the wrong project to start with. So a research-heavy project shouldn't be your first project. A very technical project with a lot of characters, an ensemble piece, shouldn't be your first project. So from one level, you have to measure the projects you take on according to the skill set you have, and as it grows, the projects can be more complex. And just think of it like any other skill-based craft. If you're an architect, you don't build your skyscraper first. You start with a doghouse, you build a garage, and then you work your way up. So one of the reasons we see writers set themselves up to fail technically, because they haven't really assessed the needs of the project and their own craft level.
And if you're just a screenwriter, then that means writing a really kick-ass script and putting it in front of somebody and making the first page so good that they have to keep reading to page 5, and making the first 5 pages so good they have to keep reading to page 10, and making the first 10 pages so good that they never put it down until they get to the last page, and they have to pick up the phone and call you as soon as they're done. That's how good your script has to be. And it can't be that good that you can't think it's that good. All your friends have to read it and think, holy shit, this is the best thing I've ever read. Can I say that on your?
Yeah, please.
We're on the internet, right?
Yeah, please. We'll censor it for the ratings.
Okay. And then your friends have to show it to their friends. And people who don't even know you have to read this and think, this is the best thing I've ever read. I can't wait to see this on television or in the movies. And when you have a script that's getting that kind of reaction from your friends, then you can walk into somebody's store and say, here, this is what I can do. Read this and you will hire me. And you'll have that confidence to go into the room and exude that. And if you have that confidence, people will read that first page. If you walk into somebody's office and you feel that way about your material, and you know without a shadow of a doubt that this is a great script, that gets across to people, and they'll read your first page. But if your first page is amateurishly written, they're going to stop right there. Somebody sent me a great idea, and it was one of the few times in the last year where somebody contacted me, said, hey, I have this idea for a movie. I've written a script. Would you read it? And the pitch, which they actually broke the rules, and they sent me the pitch in the very first email, so that I had, I would have had to stop reading and, to not have been exposed to the idea. And fortunately, it was not an idea I already had. But it was an interesting idea. And so I said, sure, send me the script. And we did a release for them, and they sent me the script. And I got the script, and I was really excited to read it. And the first page, I opened it up, and it wasn't even formatted properly. And I read the first page, and they weren't writing in proper sentences. And I had to slog through this thing to figure out what they were trying to say. And I gave up after a couple of pages because they'd abused me, basically. They'd stolen my time, they'd wasted my time on something that wasn't a professional product, that could never be produced in its current state. And maybe if I had forced myself to read the whole script, there would have been a nugget in there that was a great idea, and with some work, I could have pounded the script into shape and tried to do something with it. But who has that time? And who knows? You could get to the end of this 120-page script. It takes you 2 hours out of a very busy day. And you get to the end, and it could all have been crap. Even though that one-sentence pitch they sent me was a good idea. So you got to be sure, and you can't just read it yourself and think it's great. Other people have to be telling you it's great.
99% of writers, they will always talk in Hollywood about it's all about the connection, it's all about who you know. That's so overrated. 99% of writers, when they finally meet somebody who is a useful connection, they don't have the story tools to make that connection pay off. They don't have the craft foundation. So it's all about this ability to treat writing as a profession. And part of that is I can never know enough about how this craft works.
A good script honestly kind of sells itself. And that's the biggest problem, is that people don't have the script that sells itself. A script will open doors for you. You don't have to open the door. And that ends up being the biggest problem. People think there's some trick to it, but there's not a trick to it. The trick to it is to have the script that when people read it, they say, I want to spend money to make this movie. And those scripts are hard to write. The break that I had that got me to Los Angeles was I gave a copy of a script to a woman I had a crush on, and said, there's a role in here that's perfect for you. She immediately moved to Los Angeles, was in a B horror movie, gave a copy of that script to the, I want to say the line producer, but somebody on the set, not the producer, not the big producer, but some underling, and said, there's a role in here that's perfect for me. He read the script and goes, this is so much better than this crappy movie I'm working on now. Handed it to his best contact, who handed it to his best contact, and that script traveled. And that's what you want, is the script that travels, that when people read it, they go, I want to be associated with this project. And those are the hard ones to write. Those are the ones that people underestimate, how they think their script is at that level and it's not there yet. And that's, I don't, that's the hardest thing, is like, you need to have the great script.
It's not easy. Everybody thinks it is. You go see a movie and you go, oh, I could have written a better movie than that. You probably could. But it's an engineering skill. Screenwriting, whether it's for the big screen or for TV or for web series, it is engineering. You have to fit within parameters of time often. You have to fit within parameters of production, what you can actually see. Easier now with all the computer-generated imagery. That's great. But you have to persist in learning the craft, and you have to persist in your belief in yourself and your original idea and your ability to keep improving your skills.
The thing about a screenplay is it's a million different working parts, and getting them all to line up is like often a miracle. You know, even for a professional writer, okay, now I'm going to tell a story without the name. I met a famous professional writer who at the time was the #1 screenwriter in the world at a screening of one of his movies, and because I was a wannabe screenwriter at the time, because I was a wannabe screenwriter at the time, I knew what he looked like. So I went up to him and talked to him, and there had been a script of his that had been in the trades that, because he was famous, the whole deal was that was going to be his next big script, and the studios were going to pay a lot of money for it, and then nothing happened. I said, so whatever happened to that script? And he goes, well, they can't all be winners. I said, wow, that's awesome. That here's a guy that probably could have sold his laundry list and wrote the script that didn't work. And so he went, this script didn't work. I could probably sell it, but it's never going to be a good movie. So I'm putting it aside on that shelf until he figures out how to make it work. And so even somebody that's a professional can write a script that doesn't work.
Among screenwriters, what a lot of new writers don't get is that the frustration that they're experiencing, it never goes away. That's the way it operates at the highest levels for the most successful practitioners. You don't need to be a tenured college professor to know that it's better to be rich than poor. And of course, to be a wealthy, successful writer is better than being an impoverished, unsuccessful one. But both of those, the impoverished, unsuccessful one and the very successful, wealthy one, will have the same frustration, the same disappointment, the same issues involving fulfillment. It ain't easy for anybody.
I think most people fail at screenwriting because it's the most difficult craft in the world. You know, people talk about, oh, I want to be a director. No, directing is a very difficult, challenging job, but it doesn't compare to writing. Craft of storytelling, most complex craft in the world, takes a lifetime commitment to master it. Now, a lot of writers either don't realize that it's going to take a lifetime of commitment, or they don't want to face a lifetime of commitment, because that's a lot of work, and that's a lot of time. Most writers are looking for the magic bullet.
I met somebody the very first month that I came to LA, and I didn't know that I wanted to do films. I was a playwright, and I came with a play, and I met a young producer who now is a big deal, Mark Gordon, brilliant guy. And he said to me, I was like, oh my God, do I want to do film, blah, blah, blah. And he said, you know, this business, he goes, you have to ask yourself, can you handle something terrible happening to you once a year and then something horrible happening every day? And otherwise you can't live with it, because it's a very tough business, and you have to, it's like when people say to me, oh, I want to write a book, or I want to write, you know, I'm like, it shouldn't be about you want to, you need to. And if you don't need to, like what Raphael just said, he needs to.
Screenwriting is quite oftentimes very challenging and very difficult on a daily basis. So you have these waves of these peaks of megalomania where you write 20 pages in a day and you think you're an incredible writer and you think you're unstoppable. And then you have these other days or weeks where you don't write a word, or you don't write a page, or you don't get anything done. And you really reach these valleys of self-loathing. So I don't feel like there's really an in-between. There's no real middle ground. I think you are mainly in the trenches. Most of the time you are dealing with self-doubt, in my opinion, as a writer. And dealing with the hardships that come along with trying to create, whether it's a feature film or a novel or a television pilot or project. So I think, sure, maybe some writers out there are optimistic about their ideas and what the story that they want to tell, but I think the overall psychology and mentality of a writer, from my opinion, and from my experience, is that of someone who is constantly dealing with challenges on a daily basis. And so for me, I don't know that I would say I'm optimistic. I'm very excited about what I'm writing most of the time. But that's on the surface of things. I think when you dig deeper, you know, we are self-loathing individuals. You know, we have issues with self-deprecation, and I think for me that's usually where I'm at.
I think screenwriting is as hard as brain surgery. In fact, I think it's a little harder. And the myth is that in Hollywood, it's full of stupid people. Dumb people who've just stumbled into their success. They're smoking a spliff by the pool in Malibu. Oh, that's a good script. Let's do that one. And then here comes more money. In my experience, the smartest people I've ever met work in Hollywood. It's a myth that it's full of dumb, angry, jerky people. And it's a myth Hollywood peddles because it's fun. People want to believe that. Entourage is based on that. Other movies are based on that, but it's just not true. People want to believe Hollywood's evil and stupid. That's fine. They can believe that, but it's not. So when you're writing a story, you have to, it's extremely difficult art to conquer. You've got to have at least 3 gifts. You have to have a gift for telling a big story. You have to have a gift for telling a story inside a scene. That's a completely separate art. And then you have to have a gift for putting the two together in a constrained time. Those are 3 separate gifts. It takes a while to learn them. You must have talent too. So none of this is to discourage anybody from doing this, but I want you to understand that this art is an art that isn't going to come to you all as just a big package that you can just sit down and write it all out. In my experience, most of the time, the writers I work with that are really successful are lacking maybe one of those 3, or they have maybe 2 and a little bit of the third, but they don't have it all. So they have a process that they have to go through to learn that last gift. And it can take them 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years to do that. 99% of the geniuses, quote unquote, I work with, they do rewrites. They do a lot of rewrites. Ron Bass will obsess on a script for months before he lets it out of his sight. And that's the general rule. So it's a difficult craft that takes extraordinary discipline to achieve, usually.
It's really a lot about discipline. I think talent is what you're born with. Maybe discipline can be learned to some extent, relative to the way that you're brought up by your parents and the way you're taught by your teachers in the early part of your education. But I would say the most overrated part of the equation is talent. That discipline is really the important part of it. And discipline, here's discipline, here's how you measure discipline, that it's how much time you're willing to put into this. I was talking to a writer the other day who's being told that her script isn't ready. Well, she's rewritten it already 3 times, she said. Well, David Koepp, K-O-E-P-P, a very, very successful writer who's a former student here. He wrote 2 of the Jurassic Park pictures. He wrote Spider-Man. He's a gigantically successful writer. He says the reason for his success is his ability to get through 17 drafts of a screenplay. So this young woman I was speaking to yesterday doesn't have the discipline. She doesn't want to give it the time that it takes. So it really does take a lot of time, and I think that it's harder to understand that when you're really young, and easier to understand it conversely when you're more mature.
A lot of new screenwriters think that it's going to be easy, and it's not. And they think that they're going to write one script and it's going to sell. And that's not the way it works. It's like you're going to basically you have to love writing because you're going to be doing a lot of it.
I talk to professional writer friends and we're always amazed. We think, okay, it's going to get easier now. It doesn't. It gets harder. Because the better you get, the higher you set the bar for yourself on your script. Cracking a story is always hard, no matter how much you know, because every story is totally unique. Yeah, there's certain elements that you can use, that you can hang your hat on, you can get a way into the story and so on, but every one is tough. So that's why this having this professional approach to being a writer, being a storyteller is so important. It's the only thing that A, makes you successful, but B, gets you through.
I mean, I think I remember, I could probably count on one hand the amount of times that I've had a stretch of writing where I feel like I don't know where it's coming from. It's just so fantastic and I'm very excited about it and it just flows out of me. So those are few and far between. I think really it's those other moments where you are in the valley of self-loathing that are there just because it's so difficult to complete a story. I mean, if you're lucky, you're getting 3 pages a day on a script, that you're writing. At least that's how I work. So in trying to answer your question, I guess that, like I said before, there is no real middle ground for me. So I try to just dig myself out of those trenches and write the best product that I possibly can. And, I think the thing is, a lot of independent filmmakers and writers have to, especially, for the new normal, have to write on spec on a daily basis. So if you write for 3 weeks and it's potentially not going to be anything that you can use, that's 3 weeks of your hard-earned time and effort, and you have to account for finances and everything as well. So it can just be draining on you, Whereas I think that when you get into a situation where you have a first look deal with a studio or a production company, or you have someone who is optioned the script and is developing it with you, and you can start writing and be financially comfortable, I think then it's more of whether or not you can be creative on a daily basis, but at least you can put aside the fact that you have the income to be comfortable to be writing.
The only failure in screenwriting is A, not writing. I wrote a script 5 years ago. I'm running around with this one script. I haven't touched a typewriter or computer since then for any creative purposes. That is screenwriting failure, not writing new content, not generating new content.
Getting your butt into the chair and your hands on the keys and seeing where it goes.
What I often see people do is not actually write. This is the most common thing I see. They don't actually produce on the page every day. They say they do, they go to classes, they'll go to seminars. if you don't write every day, if you don't sit down for whatever you decide, an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, if you don't actually put words on the page every day, then you can't say I'm a writer. You're never going to succeed that way. And that's what I see more than anything else. I'll get another book on how to do it. I'll go to another class on how to do it. But will I actually sit down and write every day? No, I don't feel like it today. I'm not inspired today. The muse isn't hitting me. That's what I see over and over again that people do to fail. That's a big one.
Keep working, keep writing scripts, and knowing that every script you write, it's going to make you a better writer.
It's better to do a little bit every day than to try and binge write. So just if you can find an hour every day, that might be a good way to get some work done.
I'm very privileged. I have my duties here on campus, but I have many days that I don't have to come in at all, and I work out of my office at home where I write, and I can just write the whole day, but I don't write the whole day. I write about 2 or 3 hours. There's no reason a salesman can't set aside an hour to write. He's just going to go more slowly. I like to tell writers, imagine, you're saying you don't have enough time to write. Nobody has enough time to write. Stephen King doesn't have enough time to write. There's not a writer who will tell you he has enough time to write. Yet, supposing you went to bed an hour later every night, that would liberate 2 months of writing time. I'm talking about not around the clock, but just a 40-hour, 5-day week. You would get, if you had another 365 hours available, which is what you'd have if you went to sleep an hour later every night, that would give you 2 months to write in the year that you haven't used yet, in addition to whatever else you're doing. Now, maybe you couldn't write a screenplay in 2 months, although maybe you could. Our students here have to in 10 weeks. But you could certainly write a big chunk of it. Well, supposing you say, well, I already go to bed too late. I can't go to bed an hour later. Well, what about go to bed 15 minutes later? Get up 15 minutes earlier. Couldn't you manage that? That would, if you could do that over a year, that would give you a month of writing time. So you do have the time. The problem is you don't have the will.
I think we've spent our life watching, and that we should continue to do so, but that's not really homework. It's just what we do and what we love, and now we don't have to feel guilty about it, you know? Great, woo, okay, terrific. So you're doing that anyway. As far as networking goes, it is the question of keeping your eyes open, shaking hands, making friends, capitalizing on relationships. That's all. So that can also happen at the same time. This is all sort of multi-platform stuff that you're doing anyway. So when it comes to the real time spent for writing, right? You know, you can't really count any of those things as, well, I was writing because I was watching TV and I was making a friend. You got to write.
The real writers hate to write. All writers who are serious writers, they don't like to write. We love having written, but actually writing is always painful. Is it good enough? I thought yesterday what I did was, now I'm rereading it and it's not as good as I remember, and so on. And very, very frustrating. Do I dare show this to anybody? How can I expect people to, in exchange for this, give me money so I can put orthodontia on my children's teeth and so on? This guy said to me, it was such a liberation to read, for him to read that all writers hate to write, and to discover that he's not the only one who doesn't leap from his bed in the morning, with bells on, eager beyond description to get into his writing. No, we all want to put it off, delay it, defer it. It's that way for everybody.
So I've also had writers come to me who will say, Jen, I can't deal with this lifestyle because I'll work for a year and a half and then I won't work for a year. And then I'll maybe work for a year again and then I won't work for 2 years. Like, what is this? And all I can say to that is you have to always be writing. The working writer's biggest mistake is they stop writing. And when you stop writing because you're on staff for 5 years, so that when you're you're suddenly not staffed anymore and you don't have 3 new pilots to take out, then you don't have anything to show that what has happened to your writing over that 5 years that you've been on staff.
I've seen that again and again with screenwriters. People email me, or I work with people and they say, oh, I can't get anybody to read my script and I can't get an agent and so on, and they're still, diddling around with the same script they were working on 3 years ago. And the ones who make it are the ones that just, I write. Every day I write, and I write, and I write. And I crank out scripts and they get better and better, but they just keep going after it. If you really are tenacious, you're more likely to succeed than any other quality, including talent, I think.
Every writer wants to jump over everything always, including myself. I don't consider myself to be a terribly important writer, although I'm a much experienced one. The Wall Street Journal calls me a writer of substantial professional experience. And I have done a lot of work in screen, but not only in screen. I'm also the author of best-selling fiction and nonfiction, and I've also written short films. Commercials, corporate propaganda, sales films, instructional, educational films. So I'm hugely experienced, and yet I still want to jump over all of the requirements. But every time I try to do that, I realize I can't. That it just takes time, and you have to give it the time, and that's the most difficult part of it, because after all, time is what your life is made up of. And time is like the currency of life. If somebody wastes my time, I feel they've killed me a little bit. They've taken part of my life away. And that's what art wants. It wants your life. You better be ready to give your life to this if you want to be a screenwriter. It sounds cynical and dark, but I mean it the opposite way. I can't imagine a more wonderful thing to give a life to than creative expression. Imagine people who do succeed as writers. They're literally swapping their daydreams for dollars. They're trafficking in their own imagination. What could be more wonderful than that? I think it's cause to rejoice, not to despair, but to rejoice.
I didn't really know that I wasn't passionate about it. Now, see, I had the dream, but I didn't know that the day-to-day process would be so unrewarding for me. That was what I really finally realized is, I don't really want to do this every day. It doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't give me any pleasure. It's not my passion. So I had to realize that. I just had a writer tell me that the other day, a beginner who's got a lot of success. He won a contest a year or so ago, and he just told me a month ago, he says, Peter, I don't want to do this. I really don't. I thought I did, but I don't. So sometimes it's really not our dream, and we need to realize that.
I did a lot of stuff wrong, like every writer. The only thing I did right was I, stayed with it for a long time and wrote through my mistakes.
You've read this script. You've read several versions of it. Am I beating a dead horse here? Should I just move on? I sure don't know. I've seen people rewrite scripts into oblivion where they should have gotten rid of, in my view. And I've also seen, conversely, scripts that looked pretty hopeless that suddenly broke through. Who am I to say? I can't tell you that. It's easy for me to say, but you've got to do all the work on that. That's the micro version. Should I stick with this script or should I give it up? I'll also say what is very useful is to put a script aside and write something else and then come back to it. And you'll have a new perspective on it. The macro version of that is, and I get this all the time, do I have what it takes to be a writer? Am I good enough at this? And my answer is, I don't know. That's not for me to say. That's for should I continue to do this? Actually, my answer to that usually is no. Don't continue to do this. And why not? Because you had to ask me whether or not you should do it. If you need to ask somebody about whether or not you should be a writer, then you should not be a writer. You should be a writer because you can't help yourself. There's nothing else you can do. You just can't stop yourself. You have to write. Not because it's fun, but because you have to do it, just like you have to breathe, you know.
I have seen writers who have been knocked down again and again, and suddenly it's a certain point that just turns their world and really helps them own what they're sending out to the world. And I think that's the greatest thing in the world when you see that happen. And again, that's the life process happening mixed with the professional process.
5 years is a long time, but then there's some people that it happens in the 6th year. I think that it depends on how strong a stomach you have for putting in the work and not seeing results. 5 years is a long time, but if you have a vision that's really strong, then I say don't give up.
There was one particular time that that I was just, in fact, I was going to quit writing. I did for a year, and I thought I'm going to do something totally different. I applied to law school, and I was going to live in DC of all places. And I mean, I liken it to a nervous breakdown. My nervous breakdown was applying to law school. It's like the worst thing in the world I ever could have done. And I did it. I mean, I did it. I got in. I was going to go. And then, like, a miracle happened. And, I mean, not that anybody knew that they were saving me, but then Jerry Bruckheimer saved me by hiring me for Coyote Ugly. And I was just so, I'd worked in bars my whole life. So it made sense. And then I got the bug again. And that's when that's my big time of wanting to quit. And then there's like a moment in every day where I go, this is insane. But then I get over that.
The difficulty of facing the page by yourself, being in that room alone, trying to meet that challenge day in and day out is very difficult on the human mind. And writers, first of all, don't realize what it's going to take psychologically at first. And then when they get into it and they try to deal with that, they really don't have the tools or the support system to be able to be in it for the long haul. I often tell writers the people who work professionally are the people who are still standing. You know, everybody else they were knocked out because for various reasons they didn't get the right training, but most often it's they cannot handle the psychological difficulty of what it takes to write at the professional level, meaning writing alone, facing rejection again and again over many years and so on until you have mastered the craft at the level that somebody says, hey, you're a good writer, this is a good script, I'm going to hire you. So it's the people who A, commit to the craft, and B, who are still standing, who are there after many years, so that finally somebody says, yeah, you've done the work, you're actually pretty good. Because keep in mind, most people don't know a good story. They don't, they just know, I like it or I didn't like it. But they're not trained as writers. Again, it's the most complex craft in the world. So part of the difficult psychology is how do you get over the fact that you're getting rejected from people who don't know what you do? That's very tough to face.
The thing writers have to understand more than anything else is everything that happens to them rejection-wise is only going to happen further in their career. So the more they adjust to bouncing off rejection and using it to move forward instead of falling victim to it, the better their chances of success.
If the screenwriter wants to write for television, the answer, as much as people hate to hear it, is yes. Television is an all hands on deck kind of business, so you really do have to be here. for a writer to get staffed, for a writer to sell a pilot, there's going to be an obscene amount of meetings that precede that. There's an obscene amount of networking. So a writer really does need to be here for television unless they are brought in by their agent, their manager, just to sell a pilot, and they're able to come in for weeks at a time for meetings. That said, if you want to staff on television, you have to be here. People are not going to take a chance that you'll make the move once you get the job, and they're going to give more consideration to writers who are available to walk into the room in 2 days. I can tell you most of my writers who've gotten staffed for the first time on a show usually got the word 5 or 6 days before. It's not one of those things that you know weeks and weeks and months in advance. You hope, you have suspicions, you're told by the showrunner, but you don't have your paperwork in hand until a few days before the room opens. And so you have to be available to not only be in the room when the room opens, but also network executives want to meet with you. It wasn't expected, but here they are. It's now 10 o'clock on a Wednesday morning and they want you in at 3. And if you can't make it, you don't have the job. So you have to be available for all of those things. I find that showrunners and executive producers are less willing to take a chance on writers that they don't know to be available in that fashion. Now, for film writers, I find the situation's very different. As a film writer, you can be anywhere in the country. The world is a little bit more difficult because we do want you to be available for meetings, be available quickly. So I do find that a lot of people are a bit more forgiving as far as geography is concerned for feature writers. The most important thing about living in Los Angeles is that it's a sign of your commitment to this career. I work with a great feature writer who lives in Colorado, who met a manager who wanted to sign him, and the manager knew that we had worked together, and so he called me and he said, "How do I know this guy's really serious? He's in Colorado." And so I had to step in and say, no, I promise, I swear, I've read more than one piece. This writer, this is the career, this is what he's doing, it's not a hobby. So the move to Los Angeles is not so much for availability on the film side, even though that is important, so I don't want to discount that. You have opportunities to network and meet, and not only meet executives, but meet your class of writers, but it is an important sign of commitment to this is the thing that I want. It is not a hobby. It is not a thing that might or might not turn out to be. It's something that I'm banking on. You know, a lot of people talk about coming to Los Angeles because this is where movies and television are made. And if this is what you want to be a part of, if you can, you should get here. Now, as a mother of 2 and a wife, I certainly understand that if my life was elsewhere and I wanted to be a writer, maybe moving is not that available to me. If that is indeed the scenario, then the writing has to be that much stronger so that it does get noticed through the surer channels of the big contests. So if you're a feature writer, you want to get to semi-finalist in the Nickel Fellowship, not necessarily just the quarterfinalist. You want to really have your work surface in a way that it becomes undeniable. And undeniable is a word that you're going to hear me say a lot because it's a big key term for the industry. Work that is undeniable, writers who are undeniable, that's who the industry wants to work with.
They need to be around other people, you know, like I've gotten letters from people saying, I live in South Dakota, can I still stay here? And no, you cannot, you know? If I have to live here, you have to live here. Like, you know, and I love it here, but I'm saying, you know, it's hard enough to crack the mystery wall, you know? How are you gonna do it from North Dakota? You know, you're not gonna do it. You know, maybe you can move there after you're huge, I don't know. But, you know, I don't know where some of the greats live, but when you're building your career, you have to be here.
Really, the best advice, though, is to come to LA and network. There's really no substitute for it, and most writers hate doing that. We're not salespeople. To this day, I mean, we're sitting in my manager's office, and every time I come into this room, he's telling me, look, you got to be a salesman. And I'm like, I'm not a salesman, I'm a screenwriter, damn it. But that's the nature of the beast, and you have to learn to do that, as distasteful as it is. You know, and if you have the right kind of personality and you can go to a Hollywood party, or, you know, an off Hollywood party, but somebody might be there. You know, the old saw about 6 degrees of separation. Everybody knows somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody who can do something for you. And the more people you meet, the better your odds become. It's a mathematical process. Eventually, you're going to strike somebody who can help you out.
You have to persist in the hardest part, I think, which is marketing and getting your work out there.
A lot of managers will say, I have 3 stacks on my desk. My clients, people who recommend material to me, and then the blind queries. And the blind queries probably never get read. I hear it all the time. They always get pushed to the bottom, okay? You want to be, if you're not that first stack, you want to be in that second stack. And how do you get into that second stack? Well, you got to have people that are willing to go out on a limb for you. People that, people that you've cultivated relationships with that are willing to take your material to this person or to that person, or know this distributor, or know this person that runs the film festival that is going to say, yeah, we could sneak you in, and it happens all the time, by the way. And that's what I mean by, it's who you know.
I believe that those stories really stem from writers who actually have a career in motion, and they have contacts they can reach out to. And it's not that they sit and actually write a screenplay over 48 hours, it's that they have an idea and they already have a team of people who trust them because they've delivered so many quality scripts in the past. A newbie writer from scratch, throwing an idea to a major studio and expecting a check in the mail or some big contract with an agent, I've never seen it happen. And I think that maybe a script has moved from point A to point B and has maybe moved up the channels. By the time that movie reached the screen, I don't think it had any similarities to the original idea, and I'm not sure that the writer received anything from it either.
Because at the end of the day, it comes down to the connections that you have, and it's about who you know.
Everyone is going to try to find a favor to give someone so they can later on collect a favor. And so it's like a favor business. So I'm going to do this favor for you, and then later on I'm going to ask you for a favor. But when I ask you for that favor, I better be careful that this is the one favor I want to ask. Because you can do things where, again, some of my career mistakes have been asking for stupid favors when I could have asked for a better favor. And you don't realize, sometimes that you're at that point where you can ask for a better favor. And new writers can make friends with established writers. And you don't want to ask the favor too soon. Because if you ask the favor too soon, then you're the person that's just climbing. We all see you as the social climber. But if you let it go out along for a while, be the friend for a while, then eventually you can get to the point where, and if you're clever, the clever word, if you're clever, instead of saying, I would like you to introduce me to your agent, the clever writer says, could you read my script and tell me what's wrong with it? And what you hope is they read your script and go, this is an awesome script. I'm going to hand this to my agent because that's a favor I'm doing for my agent, who will then do a favor for me later on. And send out that pet script of mine that my agent doesn't want to send out because it's not commercial. No one's going to buy this. Maybe my agent will send it out then.
A true producer in Hollywood, somebody who's well connected, a creative executive in Hollywood, if they're working for a company that they're comfortable with, but maybe they're not having that opportunity to work on the stuff that they want to, but they have all the connections you wish you had, that's a great link. And yes, if you went out to them and basically approached them and said, I have 3 scripts of this genre, I would love to present them to you, and I'm not trying to get you to buy these scripts. If you're interested, fantastic, but I'm not trying to get you to buy these. I want to work with somebody and develop something from scratch. You're a creative executive, you know what sells, you have contacts, and I'm sure you have story ideas that you just don't have time to put together. Let me be that fix in your system. I'll get you the script you need, and then we can go hit the marketplace together. And that goes into faking confidence. That's a scary scenario to be in, but if you are able to approach that and basically present that kind of conversation, you will actually see quite a few doors open and a lot of emails answered. I think you need at least 2 to 3 ready-to-go feature-length scripts, or 2 to 3 ready-to-go TV spec script ideas that are completely ready to present to the marketplace. And that takes time to get to. But I think you need that in your arsenal as a minimum to be taken seriously by decision makers and to showcase your skills.
Ask somebody who has had a successful sale what version of the script sold and how many others they've written. It's the 10th draft and it's the 5th screenplay that they've written.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So you just have to keep at it and keep at it and keep at it and keep at it again.
This was ages ago, but the WGA did a survey and found that the average screenwriter sold 9 scripts before they made a set. And a lot of people think, I'm going to write 2 or 3 scripts, and if nothing happens in my career, then I'm going to quit. And it's like, you're quitting way too early. You got to like stick it out, write as many scripts as you can, and eventually one of those scripts is going to hit. And even then, once you've sold a script, people ask me things like, so how did you break in? And my answer is, which time? Because it's like every time you sell a script, you do the rewrites on that script and then you're unemployed, which means you have to find another job. And you're constantly breaking in. You're constantly having to sell things to people you don't know, you've never met before, and just keep the ball rolling. There's only so much that your representation can do for you. The rest of it, you kind of have to do yourself.
I think that's a pitfall when you say, I'm going to just keep hammering and hammering and hammering at this one script and not move on to others. Just get it done and to some level but be ready to move on. I think a goal should be 2 scripts a year, certainly. Especially if you're trying to launch your career in the early days. Don't make one idea so precious that you're just going to keep reworking it, or keep getting stuck and blocked and not wanting to do anything because you've put all your eggs in that basket.
One of the things about any creative endeavor is it's not like you can go fill out a job application to be a screenwriter and, hey, we're hiring, and you get the job. Instead, what it is you write screenplay after screenplay after screenplay after screenplay after screenplay, and each one of them nothing happens with. Until finally you write that screenplay where somebody reads it and goes, this is wonderful, here's how we can change it, and here's everything that's wrong with it. And then they cut you a check, hopefully.
Not getting notes. Huge, huge, huge in the failure of things. If you are tunnel visioned and this is how it has to be, and anything short of this, as I saw it on the page, arrives on the screen, then it will be my failure. You will fail in that because while writing is solitary, this is a highly collaborative industry. So the road to failure is not writing new material, not getting notes, wanting to be perfect. There is no perfection in this industry. It is all about getting notes, learning from notes, getting notes that you hate, figuring out what to do with them, because other people are going to have to buy in. So the road to failure is really being stunted.
First script, man, I was like everybody else. I mean, I did exactly what I said earlier, the 3 pieces of coverage, and I was expecting them to come back brilliant. I was expecting them to get the humor. It had a lot of comedy in it. And, one person liked it. They were all passes, by the way. They were all passes. And one person liked it. The other person was like, I like this character and I like this character. And one person just eviscerated it. And I, of course, spent, 5 days obsessing over that one piece of coverage going, the son of a bitch doesn't get it. He's got no sense of humor. He's an idiot. What would he know? And, I went through that whole entire thing. And then I kind of sat there and went, all right, again, all 3 people are telling, in certain instances, in certain spots, all 3 people are telling me the same thing. This character doesn't work. This character isn't, growing. You're doing a great job with your second. This was actually one of the pieces of feedback on the first one. And you talked about growth earlier, when you have to kind of realize this, you're doing a great job with your secondary characters. Your secondary characters actually have all the growth, but your lead character kind of stays here. And I went, well, wait, how is that possible? I've been thinking about this character for like a year. But then I had to go back and look at it and go, well, wait a second, yeah, right, it's true. Everybody else is kind of growing around him. And he is kind of watching them all evolve, and he's not really. So I had to go back to the drawing board. It took me a while to get there. Like, I was very how you kidding me? I was like, how dare they? What the hell? These people don't know what the heck they're talking about. Like, who is this AZ guy? Like, you get the initials of the guy that covered the script. Like, who the hell is this guy? Bring them in front of me. I'll show them what a screenplay is. And yeah, so when I finally I took a lot of the lessons I learned on the first script as far as the coverage was concerned, because I did end up getting a lot of coverage on that script because I kept rewriting it because I wanted to get positive feedback the next time. Not that I was looking for recommends or anything like that. I just wanted to see less criticisms. And if I'm getting less criticisms, then I'm cleaning things up. So a lot of the criticisms I kept getting back helped me not only shape that script, but inform the next one. Because this is where you're not, like, again, the example of, like, your primary character not moving the story along. It's the secondary characters that are moving it along. That really carried over into my second script. I knew exactly where that protagonist was going, before I wrote page one. You just have to be realistic. Like, you have to be, you can't be so precious about everything. You have to absorb it, digest it. And if you're really, if you've said to yourself, I'm being as honest with myself as humanly possible and I don't see this, then you got to fight for it, okay? That's okay. But you got to make sure you really are being honest with yourself. And obviously that's easier said than done, because as writers, we are precious about our material. Mm-hmm. We do think that it's, works, and, that other people just aren't getting it. It's easy to get to that point.
And the best of the scripts sometimes comes down to odd things like its uniqueness, which isn't odd, but its marketability at that point in time. There's times where a script, you could write a script, and I did this. I wrote a script that was about airplane hijacking, and then 9/11 happened. And so that script was instantly dead on arrival. But the thing about that script is that pre-9/11, it was an okay script. And so that's sort of the reverse of what you want. Sometimes you end up writing a script and then something happens in the world and like, this is the script. And if you have that great timing, but you also have to have the great script to back it up.
I'm definitely of the belief, when I look at my writers that have had the greatest success, it has been a combination of learning.
Maintaining an openness to learning the craft. I will often get professional writers to take my class. And when I talk to them, what I always find is these people have no ego, at least no ego that is coming across that I can see, because they're professional writers. So you would think, well, they think I already know this stuff. But they don't. They don't take that attitude. Yes, they're extremely well trained. If they get to the level of a professional writer, they're extremely well trained. But these are people who are open to learning more. And I find that is the most important quality for being a successful writer. The willingness to learn from anywhere, anyone, so that your repertoire, your arsenal, your set of tools is constantly growing. That in turn gives you the confidence to say, that person didn't like my script, but I know that it is based on these craft elements that make for a good story. So whether they liked it or not, that doesn't affect me. I know it's a good story. That's where you get the foundation of confidence that you need to get through those tough psychological moments.
But at the end of the day, you got to do what the hero of a movie has to do, and that is, if you want it bad enough, you got to overcome those deep-seated fears and somehow find the courage to step up.
I have taught all over the world, and I have found that in countries like Israel, Australia, Toronto, and London, that the type of writers that attend story events in ongoing education are working writers, versus in the US, the story events that are like, the bigger story events that are massive are for usually, I would say, the highest percentage of attendees are writers across the US who had an idea and want to make it happen versus working writers. And I definitely believe that that holds writers back from creating longevity in their careers. I believe a writer should always be educating. I always say about myself that I'm a teacher for a moment and a student for life. And I am constantly reading every book that comes out on story and emotion and business and anything that can make me move to a higher level spiritually, work-wise, on a personal level. Like, I am all about the idea that we have to constantly, every day I wake up and think about how can I be better than I was yesterday? And for the writer, it really is, how can I expand my knowledge of story through continuous learning as well as my observance and absorption of life and being able to communicate that in story? How can I continuously do that in a way that will fuel my career?